December 16, 1944. Early morning, Monschau, Germany. The frozen ground quivered as another wave of American artillery tore through the sky. Yet something about this barrage was eerily different. The shells weren't crashing into soil or shattering treetops. They were exploding mid-air, directly above the advancing German lines, showering them with a storm of razor-sharp steel that no trench or foxhole could shield against. Within the 326th Volksgrenadier Division, assaulting the 38th Cavalry Squadron's defensive line, battle-hardened soldiers, men who had survived the brutality of the Eastern Front, found themselves facing a phenomenon beyond their comprehension. These were not the predictable strikes of conventional artillery, with known impact zones and safety pockets. This was a new, terrifying precision, death descending from the sky, engineered with scientific accuracy. At that very instant, Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson, commanding the 406th Artillery Group, had made one of the boldest unauthorized choices of the Battle of the Bulge. Ignoring strict orders and without higher approval, he commanded his crews to load shells equipped with the Allies' most closely guarded innovation, the proximity fuse. Each of these fuses contained a miniature radar unit capable of sensing distance from its target and detonating at the perfect altitude, multiplying the shell's lethality many times over. The arithmetic of destruction was about to be rewritten amid the frozen woods of the Ardennes. The German troops had no idea they were encountering a weapon so advanced it would redefine not only this clash, but warfare itself. The storm had begun. Operation Watch on the Rhine opened with remarkable promise for the Wehrmacht. Hitler's final gamble placed 200,000 troops, 1,000 tanks, and nearly 2,000 artillery pieces into a secret offensive hidden beneath the fog-laden forests of the Ardennes. The Führer promised his generals that this surprise attack would split the Allied forces, seize Antwerp, and reverse a war slipping steadily toward disaster. The opening bombardment at 0530 hours on December 16th achieved total surprise. German guns roared at a staggering 1,600 rounds per minute across an 85-mile front. American intelligence had failed utterly. It had missed the massive buildup, and the front line was held by a mix of inexperienced recruits and weary veterans placed there for recovery duty. Near Monschau, Colonel Axelson confronted a desperate battlefield. The 38th Cavalry Squadron, a light reconnaissance force, was being crushed by superior enemy numbers. Standard artillery methods could not halt the German wave. In a moment of resolve, Axelson made his fateful choice: to fire the secret proximity-fused rounds without authorization. He knew this act could lead to court-martial, yet he also knew that obedience meant certain annihilation. The results were instantaneous and catastrophic. German soldiers advancing in tight formation were suddenly struck by an artillery fire unlike any they had ever endured. Shells burst 30 to 50 feet overhead, scattering deadly fragments in a vast cone that reached far beyond normal ground impacts. Veterans who instinctively ducked into foxholes or behind trees were torn apart where they hid. The science of invisible death. The proximity fuse embodied the absolute peak of American ingenuity and industrial might. Unlike time-fused or impact shells, this device contained its own compact radar transmitter, no larger than a coffee can. Inside each unit were 130 precision components, including several miniature vacuum tubes engineered to survive the immense force of being fired, up to 20,000 times the pull of gravity. The physics were astonishing. When launched, the shock of firing shattered a glass ampule of electrolyte, activating a small internal battery that powered the radar for the shell's flight. Dr. Merle Tuve, working at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, led the effort with intensity rivaling the Manhattan Project. The lab, disguised as a used car lot in Springfield, Maryland, employed roughly 3% of all U.S. physicists at its peak. Security matched that of the atomic bomb effort. Employees were forbidden to speak of their work even at home, and every fuse bore a serial number for tracking. The engineering challenge was immense. Radio tubes built for home electronics had to be completely redesigned to endure cannon fire, function while spinning at extreme velocity, and detect targets accurately in any weather. The solution came from radical miniaturization methods that would later revolutionize post-war electronics. Dr. James Van Allen created tubes no larger than pencil erasers, each containing the full workings of a standard vacuum tube. By December 1944, American industry was producing 40,000 proximity fuses per day. Over 100 companies, among them RCA, General Electric, Sylvania, and Crossley Corporation, joined in the effort. The program consumed $1 billion wartime dollars, second only to the Manhattan Project in cost. Crisis and authorization.
Axelson's unapproved use of the weapon on December 16th triggered an immediate uproar within command. He had directly violated orders limiting the fuses to anti-aircraft defense for fear that captured samples might be copied by the enemy. Yet the results at Monschau were undeniable. The German attack was stopped cold, inflicting losses that stunned both armies. Reports of the new weapon's success reached Supreme Headquarters quickly. General Eisenhower, grasping the scale of the crisis across the Ardennes, requested formal approval on December 19th. By December 21st, restrictions were lifted, and proximity fuses were cleared for general ground use throughout the Battle of the Bulge. The speed of deployment that followed displayed America's unmatched logistics. Within days, proximity-fused shells were reaching artillery units across the Ardennes. The 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion at Bastogne received its supply just as the German encirclement tightened around the town. The 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion, armed with their M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers, began employing proximity-fused shells to defend the northwestern approaches. Meanwhile, the 969th Field Artillery Battalion, an African-American unit under Lieutenant Colonel Hubert D. Barnes, used them with devastating success southwest of Bastogne. Every unit that received the new ammunition reached the same conclusion. These fuses had changed artillery forever. What had once been a supporting weapon had become a decisive force on the battlefield. Forward observers no longer had to finally adjust their fire. The fuses themselves determined the perfect burst height. The need for precision decreased, while the weapon's lethality grew beyond measure. Bastogne, surrounded yet unbroken. The siege of Bastogne would become the ultimate showcase of the proximity fuse in defensive combat. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and outnumbered, clung to the crucial crossroads under relentless German assaults. Their lifeline was artillery support. Chief among them, the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, armed with 75mm pack howitzers capable of firing proximity-fused shells. Between December 19th and 31st, according to unit logs, the 463rd fired precisely 7,676 rounds. Not all were equipped with proximity fuses due to scarce supplies, but those that were delivered catastrophic results. German infantry columns dissolved under the airbursts. Entire platoons wiped out in seconds. The December 22nd attack, following General Macaulay's now legendary "nuts" reply to the German surrender demand, displayed the weapon's brutal efficiency. Enemy troops advancing in traditional formations across the snow were caught in the open. Proximity-fused shells detonated overhead with perfect timing, overlapping their explosions so completely that no safe ground remained. The all-African-American 969th Artillery Battalion played an equally vital role, their 155mm howitzers forming a ring of death around Bastogne's perimeter that the Germans could not breach. The larger shells, bursting 50 feet above ground, blanketed vast areas with deadly shrapnel. German prisoners later admitted that entire assault units broke apart before reaching American lines, men fleeing in terror from invisible explosions that came from the clouds. The Sauer River Massacre. The most thoroughly documented demonstration of proximity-fused devastation occurred along the Sauer River near Echternach on December 25, 26. General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was driving north to relieve Bastogne, witnessed the event firsthand and later recounted it in his memoir, War as I Knew It. A German battalion attempting to cross the half-frozen river believed darkness and fog would conceal them from American observers. Under normal conditions, artillery fire would have required several adjustments, giving the enemy time to scatter or find cover, but proximity-fused shells required none. Patton later wrote, "We caught a German battalion crossing the Sauer. The new posit ammunition was devastating. The shells burst in the air above them. They had nowhere to go. The river behind them, our fire in front and above. When it ended, we counted 702 bodies." That precise number, 702 confirmed dead, remains one of the few exact casualty figures attributed to proximity fuse use. The efficiency was chilling. An entire battalion erased in minutes with no chance of escape or survival. The psychological shock rippled through nearby German units. Soldiers began refusing orders to attempt further river crossings. Forests turned to killing grounds. The dense woods of the Ardennes, long trusted by German troops for concealment, became lethal traps once proximity fuse artillery entered the fight. In open country, a shell bursting 30 to 50 feet overhead was deadly enough, but in forests, its effects multiplied many times over. Airbursts splintered treetops, transforming branches into thousands of high-speed wooden spears. Some were as long as a man's arm and flew at hundreds of feet per second, striking with lethal force. Traditional cover tactics, hiding behind trees, digging foxholes beneath roots, became useless. Death now came from above, rendering centuries of forest fighting wisdom obsolete. American artillerymen quickly realized this multiplier effect. A single 155mm shell, detonating above the canopy, could clear an area the size of a tennis court of all living things. Metal fragments and splinters combined to create a 360-degree zone of annihilation that no training could counter. German soldiers schooled in woodland warfare found their expertise meaningless. Spreading out to reduce casualties only widened exposure. Grouping together for mutual support meant entire squads could vanish under one airburst. Against this weapon, there was no correct tactic, only survival by chance. A triumph of technology.
To the soldiers of the 1940s, the proximity fuse seemed like something out of science fiction. Inside each was a miniature radio transmitter, operating between 180 and 220 megahertz, constantly sending out signals that bounced off surrounding objects, trees, vehicles, or human bodies. As the shell neared its target, the reflected signal grew stronger until it reached a preset level, triggering instant detonation at the perfect height. The system had to survive conditions that would destroy any ordinary electronics. When fired, each shell endured 20,000 times the force of gravity, enough to crush a human body flat. The projectile spun violently, generating immense centrifugal forces, and passed through extremes from 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit barrel heat to freezing air high above the battlefield. Yet the delicate vacuum tubes inside, shielded by ingenious shock protection, worked with more than 80% reliability. Testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground had determined ideal burst altitudes: 30 feet for 105mm howitzers, the standard divisional artillery, and 50 feet for 155mm guns. The massive 240mm shells detonating above 70 feet could obliterate entire map squares of enemy forces. This technological edge translated directly into battlefield supremacy. Analyses showed proximity-fused shells were 5 to 10 times deadlier than conventional ones, with fragment coverage increasing 50-fold. In anti-aircraft use, the improvement was even more astounding. Success rates against V-1 flying bombs skyrocketed from 17% to 79% within weeks of deployment. German confusion and intelligence failure. The German failure to grasp the nature of proximity-fused technology proved disastrous. In December 1944, Wehrmacht forces captured an American ammunition dump containing roughly 20,000 proximity-fused shells, a potential goldmine of intelligence. Yet when German scientists examined the fuses, they dismissed them as impossible.
The idea that functioning vacuum tubes could survive an artillery launch contradicted everything they believed about physics and electronics. Some theorized the devices worked magnetically, others insisted the visible components were mere decoys hiding a secret mechanism. This fatal misunderstanding came down to institutional arrogance and disbelief. Germany had in fact pioneered proximity fuse development before the war even began. Rheinmetall Borsig and AEG Berlin both produced working prototypes by 1940. Yet Hitler's directive to cancel any weapons program requiring more than 6 months to reach production abruptly ended the effort. German scientists were astonished that the Americans had mastered the very challenges they themselves had abandoned. The irony was sharp, considering Germany's renowned engineering skill. Their electrostatic proximity fuses had already shown 95% reliability in testing, operating through changes in electrical capacitance instead of radar signals. Had the project continued, Germany could have deployed such fuses as early as 1941. Hermann Göring later admitted under interrogation that the German version had only been 3 or 4 months from production when the war collapsed. The Christmas catastrophe. December 25, 1944 brought no holiday reprieve. German formations that attempted to use Christmas Day for resupply and regrouping quickly discovered that proximity fuses observed no ceasefires. Field kitchens, convoys, and staging zones came under a storm of invisible bombardment. No forward observers needed. The 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion alone unleashed more than 1,000 rounds that day, nearly all with proximity fuses. Their M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers rained precise, devastating fire on unsuspecting German positions. For the first time, artillery could engage effectively without direct observation, through night and storm alike, turning it from a daylight arm into a 24-hour menace. The psychological toll was immense. German soldiers had grown accustomed to moving under the cover of bad weather when Allied aircraft and spotters were grounded. Now even that refuge was gone. Death could strike at any hour, in any weather, announced only by the faint shriek of descending shells. Malmedy and Skorzeny's commandos. On December 21, SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny led his elite troops in an attempt to seize Malmedy. These were not ordinary soldiers, but hand-picked commandos, the same men who had rescued Mussolini, nearly captured Tito, and slipped behind American lines in stolen U.S. uniforms. They represented Germany's most daring elite, yet they marched into a storm of proximity-fused artillery fire that turned their disguises from advantage to shroud. Shells burst above them with eerie precision, as if guided by some unseen intelligence. While exact casualty numbers remained debated, the assault ended in disaster, crippling Skorzeny's offensive. Even the psychological collapse among his fanatical SS veterans was extraordinary. Soldiers indoctrinated in German invincibility found themselves powerless before American science. Survivors reportedly charged the American lines in hopeless rage, preferring instant death to the relentless barrage, a total breakdown of discipline among Hitler's most hardened troops. Industrial triumph. The production miracle behind the proximity fuse stood among the greatest feats of wartime industry. By December 1944, over 100 U.S. companies had switched to manufacturing fuses. The Crossley Corporation stopped making refrigerators and began assembling them. Emerson Radio retooled from household electronics to weapons. Sylvania, RCA, and General Electric devoted entire factories to the effort. Quality control reached levels never seen before. Each of the 130 individual parts underwent rigorous testing. Each solder joint was examined under magnification, and random samples were live-fired to prove reliability under combat stress. Rejection rates were merciless. Any flawed component was scrapped. The mostly female workforce maintained this precision through 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, without knowing what they were building due to strict secrecy. They only understood it was vital. By late 1944, they were turning out one fuse every 2 seconds, non-stop. Costs plummeted from $732 each in 1942 to just $18 by December 1944 without loss of quality. This efficiency enabled the production of 22 million fuses during the war, 200,000 of which were fired in the Battle of the Bulge alone. Patton's arithmetic. General George S. Patton grasped the proximity fuse's potential better than almost anyone. As his Third Army drove toward Bastogne, he wielded it as a breakthrough weapon. His artillery chief, Brigadier General Edward Williams, devised tactics tailored to its use, most notably the time-on-target method, where multiple battalions fired so that shells arrived simultaneously. When dozens of proximity-fused rounds exploded together at ideal height, the result was cataclysmic. German troops called it the bell toll of death. Between December 22 and 29, Patton's gunners fired 50,000 fused shells, shattering resistance and opening the road to Bastogne. Patton later wrote, "That funny fuse won the Battle of the Bulge for us." Elsenborn Ridge holds. Nowhere did the proximity fuse prove deadlier than at Elsenborn Ridge, where the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions clung to key ground against the 6th SS Panzer Army, including the elite 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. From December 17 to 19, American artillery hurled 160,000 shells, about 40,000 of them fused. Though only a quarter of the total rounds, they accounted for roughly 60% of more than 5,000 German casualties. The math was irrefutable. Proximity fuses multiplied firepower fourfold. Curtains of air-burst steel annihilated German assaults charging up the steep, wooded slopes. Entire companies vanished in moments. Corpses lay so thick that later waves climbed over their own dead. After 3 days, the attacks ceased. The Waffen-SS elite had been broken by technology. Operation Bodenplata's destruction. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe launched Operation Bodenplata, 900 fighters striking Allied airfields. The surprise was total. Many Allied planes were caught grounded. But on their return, the German pilots met dense walls of proximity-fused anti-aircraft fire. Of 277 German aircraft lost that day, 172 were destroyed by flak using the new fuses. The staggering kill rate stunned both sides. Pilots trained to dodge predictive fire now faced shells detonating at the exact moment of maximum effect. The Luftwaffe, already dying, never recovered. Breaking the secret. By early January 1945, the weapon's existence could no longer be concealed. Too many had seen its effect. On January 6, the War Department authorized partial disclosure. The New York Times spoke of a revolutionary shell that multiplied American artillery power but revealed nothing technical. German intelligence recognized its meaning too late. A January 10 report from Foreign Armies West admitted, "The Americans possess a radio-controlled artillery fuse that detonates at ideal height for anti-personnel effect. It has inflicted heavy losses on our forces in the Ardennes. No effective countermeasures exist." Strategic impact. Post-war studies confirmed its decisive role. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt declared, "The proximity fuse was decisive. Our assaults failed not for lack of bravery, but because their artillery seemed to see." General Hasso von Montefiore, commander of the 5th Panzer Army, agreed. "The American guns terrified our men, especially the shells that burst above them. Even veterans panicked." Statistics bore this out. 200,000 fused shells fired, causing 15,000 to 20,000 German casualties, up to 20% of total losses. The weapon was 5 to 10 times more effective than conventional rounds and required no observers in fog or darkness. The human cost. Behind every number lay human suffering. German troops, many teenage conscripts in the war's final agony, died in ways warfare had never imagined, hunted by shells that seemed intelligent. In America, factory workers paid their own hidden price. Accidents were silenced for secrecy.
Employees at Crossley, Emerson, and others endured exhaustion and nervous breakdowns, producing the deadliest devices on Earth without knowing their purpose. The moral balance was agonizing. The Battle of the Bulge claimed 19,000 American lives, but without proximity fuses, how many more would have fallen? Each day the war shortened may have spared thousands from death in concentration camps. Technological legacy. The proximity fuse program sparked breakthroughs that reshaped the modern world. Its miniature vacuum tubes became the seed of post-war electronics. Its quality control methods became industry norms. The vast supplier coordination it required prefigured modern supply chain management. Dr. James Van Allen later applied his miniaturization expertise to satellites, discovering Earth's radiation belts. Radar concepts evolved into new detection systems. The principle of sensors making autonomous decisions birthed guided missiles, and ultimately all smart weapons. Every precision-guided munition today descends from that tiny fuse, the first device that could sense its surroundings and choose its moment to strike. Final reckoning. The Battle of the Bulge ended on January 25, 1945, with German forces in full retreat. Hitler's final gamble cost 100,000 German casualties for nothing. The U.S. lost 75,000, including 19,000 dead. The proximity fuse had proven not merely a weapon, but a war winner. Eisenhower later noted that had Germany possessed such fuses, D-Day might have been impossible, proof of their strategic weight. These were not simply improved shells, but a revolution in warfare's arithmetic. The Germans who faced proximity-fused barrages encountered something new, death that seemed to think, that found them anywhere, turning air itself into a weapon. Their ordeal marked the dawn of the technological battlefield. From Colonel Axelson's unauthorized first use on December 16, 1944, to the 200,000 shells fired across the Ardennes, the proximity fuse showed how science could decisively alter war. The fusion of American industry, intellect, and adaptability forged a tool that helped decide the conflict's fate. In the end, the story of the proximity fuse is one of transformation, technological, tactical, and human. It proved that democracy could forge weapons of unmatched precision, that ingenuity could overcome numbers, and that in modern war, superior science would prevail. These lessons not only shaped the war's conclusion, but also the entire structure of warfare that followed. In the frozen woods of the Ardennes, the age of technological combat truly began. The mathematics of death were rewritten by miniature radar brains inside shells, forever changing how humanity fights. Those who died beneath proximity-fused airbursts were victims not just of a battle, but of a revolution in warfare that still defines our world today.